Good morning, or whatever time you're watching this at. I'm John Turner from my narrated PowerPoint project, History 216, Winter Introduction to World War II, for Professor Maniatis. So, I'm going to be talking about Marshal Georgy Zhukov of Russia today. And on our right here, is himself, Georgy Zhukov. And that's him with many of his medals. He's a very decorated man. So, introduction to Georgy Konstantinovich Zhukov. So, who was he and what did he do? We're going to explore that in this project today. He was born on December 1st, 1896, and he died June 18th, 1974 in Russia, and he was 77 years old. So, what was his impact for Russia, for the world? What did he do? What did this guy do? We're gonna explore. And why is this guy unknown? For some of us, this is the first time we're hearing about him. And many Americans in the United States don't know much about him. Europe may know a little bit more, but man, he is very popular in Russia. And we're going to see why. So, what did his family, school, and early life look like? So, this is Zhukov in the 1920s, and that was his first wife. So, who were his family? So, he lived on a farm and he worked on a farm from a young age. His dad was a fur clothing manufacturer, and so was his mother. His dad was also a cobbler, so worked with shoes, built shoes, made shoes. And he did that until World War One. So his schooling, he took 3 years of primary school, kind of what high school is in the United States. He was very good in math and science. He was very intelligent. He was a native Russian speaker, and he knew a little bit of German. Um, and later on, like after World War II, when he meets United States generals, he's gonna learn some English or at least have translators with him. So he had two wives and four children. So his first wife was Alexandra Divina Zhukova. She was born in 1900 and passed in 1967. So from 1920 to 1953, she was a common law wife. So that meant that he didn't have a marriage license with her, and they finally got one in 1953. So he divorced her in 1965, and and then she died like a year or so later. And then after that, he had his second wife, Galina Alexandrinova. She died of breast cancer, and she was a nurse, and that's how she met Zhukov, was like at a hospital. So his mom was Ustinia Zhukova, and his dad was Konstantin Zhukov. Um, and they were he was born in 1851, passed in 1921. Um, and then his sister, Maria Zhukova, 1866 to 1944. He had a baby brother named Alexei who died as a baby in 1901. Um, and he had four daughters, Erin and Maria, who are still alive. He also had a wartime mistress, and he also had Ella and Margarita, who are now passed away. So how does his childhood shape him? He had a very rough childhood because it was on the farm and it's made him strong. And we're gonna see how that boldness of him plays out in his later life. So this is one of his daughters at a book signing for a book about him and Russian war. That is his second wife later on in his life. And over here is his first wife, and between them are his two children, Era and Maria. So what did he do in World War One? We're about to see that. So he fought in World War One from 1914 when Russia entered to 1917 when they left. He joined the Bolshevik Party during the October Revolution in 1917. So he went from fighting for the Tsar, the King of Russia, to fighting against him. And he was kind of radicalized by the party. But wasn't necessarily radicalized. It was more like he chose to join because he didn't feel like the Tsar was doing right by the Russian people. So he earned the Cross of St. George for heroism 2 times. So while fighting, maybe taking a base, he got these 2 items right here. He received Order of the Red Banner, and that was for just participating in the October Revolution and winning against the Tsar. And then how did World War One shape him? So he learned a lot. He learned that mechanized troops do better than when it's a group of soldiers going against a static unit. So now we're entering the interwar period with Zhukov here. So this is Zhukov in the 20s, early 30s. And so he fought at Khalkhin, which was a battle in Mongolia in 1939 against Japan. And normally you don't hear about Japan and Russia fighting, so it's one of those more niche battles. But yet they fought. And during this battle, he received the Hero of the Soviet Union. So during this battle, um, the main thing was the Russians had a superior force. Japan had a pretty good force there in Mongolia too. At this time, they're taking over islands in the Pacific and uh, kind of making plans for Pearl Harbor, but we're not there yet. We're not going to talk about that. But they're trying to take over in the east and in Asia. And so they start encroaching on Russian land in Mongolia, and the unit he was with got sent out to kind of quell this fight here. And so his basically what he was told is do whatever you can to stop the Japanese from advancing on us. And so his plan was, the Japanese had one large unit. Their army was set in one place. So he's like, I'm gonna set my group into 3 different parts, and all of it was mechanized infantry. So they had tanks, vehicles, and lots of ground troops, along with Mongolian forces. So he was gonna send his main force head on against the Japanese and let the Japanese kind of envelope them or at least fight them head on. And with his flanks out on the left and right of the Japanese forces, in a bull's head formation, kind of go around and circle the Japanese forces and hit them from the sides and the back. And this strategy played out really well, and he won for it, which is very commendable. And you're gonna see this in his battle strategies for the next 5-6 years for World War II. So after this battle, Stalin notices him. He's survived by the skin of his teeth through the Stalin genocides, but Stalin finally notices him for all the right reasons. He's like, wow, this is a competent general. He knows what he's doing. He can get the job done. So he's like, I don't want to do anything to this man. He's gonna help me. So and this was also the start of their relationship together for war and for government and for power and stuff. So, as I said, head-on assault with flanking encirclement. He wins. The Russians say that against the Japanese had 61,000 dead, wounded, missing, or captured, while Japan claims it was more around 8 to 9,000. Russian losses were about 18,000 or 20,000, and his battle only lasted a couple of days. I mean, it was not a long battle, but most historians believe that the claims from Russia are more accurate to what happened during this battle. So, by those numbers, this is by means a large battle. But because this theater of war, we don't really focus on in the United States, so how are we supposed to know this unless we are over there? But if you do your reading, you can find this stuff. So, very interesting battle. So, as a general in military, up until 1939, when at Calican Gol, and after, he held many titles. So before 1939, he was just like an officer or a major, just like behind the scenes and like helping his commanding officers, whatever was needed there. So I mean, as I said, behind the scenes, not a noticeable man. So after 1939, after his victory, he becomes noticeable. That's when he keeps getting promoted. And we'll see how far this promotion goes throughout the course of the war. But this is the start of his takeoff to power. So, as I stated, he survived the purges. And the Stalin purges executed many Russian officers. So the leadership of the military was just decimated by Stalin because he's a paranoid guy. And like this included just people, other people too. There's lots of things happening in Russia at this time and being sent off to the gulags. But Zhukov, quiet. He didn't have a thing against Stalin. He was just like calm, cool, collected guy. Just like knew how to keep his mouth shut and very intelligent. So he's like, if I want to survive this, I gotta keep my cool. I gotta keep quiet. So after Calican Goal, when he's been promoted, he helped draw plans for event of war with Germany. So, and this is 1939. Germany is pressing on into the other European nations, and there's starting to be a buildup on the Eastern Front for Operation Barbarossa, but no one's expecting war yet. But in case, Zhukov, other Russian generals, they are building plans to defend themselves and to attack. One of the biggest things for Russia in World War II and the interwar period are their tanks. They have the numbers against everyone. And their tanks were kind of not running too well. And they had gas and gas engines, and it just wasn't working. So he was one of the people that was like, hey, let's bring the diesel engines into the tanks, see if they run better. Some of the other countries are using diesel. Let's see how this goes. And it worked out. And right here, we have the Russian T-34. This is the mass-produced tank of the war. One of the best tanks of the war by far. So if they'd gas engines, they probably would have spluttered on the battlefield and wouldn't have done too well. But because of his help to move them to diesel engines, they performed perfectly well. So we're gonna go to Battle of Calican Gol before we move on. Images. So on our left here, we have the Mongolian lines, the front lines during this battle. So just troop movements. On the right over here, we have the Russian BT-7. So before the T-34 was the BT-7, it was one of the main Russian battle tanks. And based on the image of the T-34, it's a little bit smaller. It's definitely lighter armored. It doesn't have as big of a cannon as the T-34. And from this battle and from Operation Barbarossa, they're going to learn to make their tanks bigger and better, especially to stand up to the German war machine. So right here, we have a Hero of the Soviet Union, which Zhukov did receive for this battle against Japan. So right here is an image of German soldiers operating during Operation Barbarossa on the Eastern Front. So during this time, Belarus was taking a beating because Germans like just pushing through, and they're just violently attacking everyone, trying to like get to Russia and fight Russia and take them out of the war as quickly as they can because they're doing a two-front war here. So um, Zhukov was up to the front lines, kind of on border with Belarus, just like far enough away that he wasn't in the action, wasn't going to be captured or killed by the Germans, but he was still close enough to be a field commander and like send troops in, send troops out, move troops, and do what he needed to do. So during this campaign of the defense of Russia and its territories, um, they lost contact with the Russian forces in Belarus. Whether they're cut off or destroyed, but a lot of like the command in Belarus just could not contact the Russians. And around this time, Stalin came to visit, like see how things were going, and most Russian generals did not tell Stalin what was going on. They were afraid of this man. They didn't want to be killed, so they didn't tell him much. Well, the person who did talk to him though was uh was Zhukov. So it's like he told him the cold hard truth of what was going on. He took the brunt of Stalin's anger for losing the contact, and so he was removed from this position. And we'll see where he gets moved to, but he was just removed. I mean, nothing bad happened to him otherwise than being removed. But Stalin was the angriest because of this. So he moved other generals in, and we know how this played out. They break through Belarus. They go on to siege Leningrad, Moscow, and Stalingrad. But if they had better communication, maybe it would have worked out better for the Russians earlier on. So before Operation Barbarossa even started, Zhukov had warned Stalin of the incoming German invasion. So like how did he know this invasion was going to happen? And why didn't Stalin listen? So many Russian generals were quite aware that like Germany was amassing large amounts of troops and units and tanks and men and supplies all along Russian territory borders like Belarus. And so it was pretty imminent because their air war against England was kind of petering out. So it was like, okay, they're definitely going to start turning their attention towards us. Let's get our troops mobilized. Let's get everyone ready because if they hit, they're going to hit hard. And so, couple weeks, couple days, but mainly like the night before was when they were finally like, hey, Stalin, red alert. The German invasion is imminent. We need to do something about this now. We should attack first, or we should just make sure everyone holds the line and they're ready. Sounds like we have the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with Germany. Why would they attack us? We're giving them supplies. I don't think we should do anything. Let me sleep on this. And so the next day, the next morning, in the night, Germany invades Russia. And Stalin did not listen. And at first, he didn't know what to think. He wasn't sure what was going on. He didn't think it was true. But once Germans start taking hundreds of miles of land, he's like, "Yep, we're in trouble now. It's time to fight back as best we can." So, as I said, this led to the sieges of Leningrad, Moscow, and Stalingrad. And at one of these places, Leningrad, Zhukov played a very integral role of defending it. So he received supplies from Lend-Lease with America, and the Germany surrounded Leningrad, which is kind of out on a lake. So not necessarily an island, but it's right on the water. And they had a good enough navy to kind of protect their ports. Russia's navy isn't up to par, but he was kind of inside outside the city. But he led to setting up tank traps and getting supplies and food fed into the people of the sieged city. and airdrops as best he could. And the siege lasted for a really long time, but he did a good job of defending the city. They didn't take the city. Even though the Germans were told, hey, don't focus on the cities, go around them, they still laid siege to Leningrad, but they didn't send any troops in. But he held his own. So during the middle of this Leningrad siege, he was taken back to Moscow because they're like, hey, we need to push the German forces back. They are 20 miles outside of the city. So he set up defenses in Leningrad. He also set up defenses in Moscow as well. So, and then he also led some of the, not personally shooting the gun, but he personally led some of the fighting and occurrences outside of Moscow, 20 miles outside of Moscow, to push the Germans back. And at this time, the German war machine is kind of like faltering because they're gonna push back to like Ukraine and push towards Stalingrad, and they're gonna not take the capital of Russia. I wonder why. So here we can see the defense of Moscow. Over here, so this is the line. We got the bulges over here. So we have Russia on the darker side, and we have Germany over here on the white lighter side. So Germans, as you can see, are pushing through. They're like Moscow is right here, capital's right here, and they're really close. So part of it is the defense is strong enough to hold them back. So it's strong enough. They're there. They're able to do it. I mean, it's very scary that they got this far though. But and the other big portion of this is that the German leaders were told to pull back at this time, but they held their own. So World War II battles and the Eastern Front. So the Stalingrad offensive, Operation Uranus, Zhukov was a big part of this, of pushing the Germans out. And this was on the other side of Stalingrad, but we're finally here to talk about the meat of it, meat of Stalingrad. So, um, Stalingrad was one of the longest battles of World War II by far. And Russia was in the city, and it makes you think their orders were to not engage in cities, but they did. They were there for many long months, like through the Russian winter. So this is about 1943, like 1942, 1943. Um, like the Germans, they're fighting. They're still fighting really strong, and they punch through. They're moving pretty well, and so Russians are on one side of the Volga River, the Germans on the other. Stalingrad kind of spans both sides of the river, but it's mainly on the German side right now. Um, but yeah, so the Russians are in the city. They go into the city, wipe them out, and now like the Germans are in Stalingrad, and they have a chance to pull out or go around, but they kind of just stay doing urban combat with the Russians, and this leads for the Russians to surround them and just like use attrition warfare against the Germans and like make them starve in the city, and they finally give up. But it's like, what was the idea here? So we have Kursk. So Kursk is a really large battle on the Eastern Front, one of the largest, greatest tank battles of the entire war in history, and one of the key planners of pushing the Germans back and flanking them was Georgy Zhukov. So lots of troops fought in this, ground troops, lots of tanks. Okay. And he also led Ukrainian units during Kursk after Kursk. Um, so Operation Bagration, he was a commander for that for a while, up until another offensive coming up. But he led the logistics, led the troops, but he was kind of more of like the person sending people places. He made the plans. He knew like of the Russian like numbers, the troops, and like what intel he had on the Germans. So and this was to push through Belarus, kind of get a foothold into Germany, or at least pretty close to that, and like fighting in Ukraine. So it was like kind of taking back the Eastern European nations. So when he left Operation Bagration, he was moved to the Vistula Order Offensive. So this is basically finishing off the um, Eastern European nations and moving into Central Europe. So Poland and Czechoslovakia, like kind of getting into there. So it's like they're coming up on the Rhine. They're coming up on Germany. They're about to like get into Berlin here. So I mean, this is 44. So not close to Berlin, but like the end is in sight. So this is during the Vistula Order Offensive. This is a Russian tank pulling through uh, a liberated city in Eastern Central Europe. So this was Operation Uranus, as stated above, the counterattack at Stalingrad. Right here is Germany surrounding the city. But as we know, Germany is going to come into the city right here, and then they're going to be fighting the Russians. And then the Russians are going to come back in from all sides and surround and starve off the Germans. And then they're going to break out, going back towards Europe. So here is Zhukov right here, and two other generals, leaders, planning the course of action for Kursk. So I had two fronts, and this was when Germany is still like in 43, still fighting really strong here. So they have these large bulges. So if they were to win this, they could keep pushing back into Russia. But these bulges right here are going to close back up and become straight line again. Russia's going to push the offensive back towards Europe. So we've made it to 1945. Russia is winning this war, and Zhukov has done a great job commanding it. He's been everywhere. He's been to all the major defenses of cities in Russia. He's been pushing the offensive against the Germans coming out of Russia, so Poland, Belarus, Ukraine, and taking Eastern Europe or Central Europe. And they're in Berlin. So right here is the Russian troops on top of the Reichstag in Berlin. So the kind of like the German seat of power, or like the Congress almost, where their representatives make the laws and command everything. So this is in 45. Battle's over. Russia has taken Berlin. So during the Battle of Berlin, in Berlin, getting in, fighting before the surrenders, was heavy fighting, because it's the German doorstep. It's the gates to the city, and he's in command of the First Belarusians, one of the largest, biggest, meanest fighting forces in the Russian territories. And so they're street to street fighting, like bombing it, blowing it up with artillery, like sending waves of people in and bringing tanks right on down the streets, going house to house, door to door. It's very, very bloody, atrocious fighting. I mean, there's even use of flamethrowers during this battle. It's just bloody. So, even before the fighting was even done, sweeping into Germany, one of the key goals and aspects was just to just take revenge on the Germans. Didn't matter if they were soldiers or not. Women, children, old, didn't matter. They were going to seek that revenge. And Zhukov was even like, hey, you've earned it. You've been fighting for like years now. Like, just go for it. You're here. Do what you please. So, I mean, what did that mean? I mean, it was nasty. It was murdering and killings and beatings and kidnappings, rapes and looting. So lots of looting, taking German goods and riches back to Russia. So it was pretty animalistic in the days leading up and after taking Berlin. So during this time, Zhukov was to be the one presented with taking the German surrender, accepting it, and being like the first commander of occupied Berlin. So here's our Berlin offensive map. So Berlin's here, and you can see on both sides the Nazi regime is getting crushed on both sides. You got the United States and the French, Canadian, British allies, and then you have big old Russia over here on the right. Um, they were the ones that were allowed to take Berlin itself, and as you can see, they like the lines here. They're pushing in. These are defenses, but they're fully surrounding it, fully taking it. It's going to be a bloody fight to the end here. So, what did the post-war period look like for our man Zhukov? So, we have the Berlin Soviet-German occupation zone. So, this would be the Russian side of it. So, and you got split up into four pieces. So, we have the French, British, and American sides, but we're going to be focusing on the Russian side. What was going on East Berlin? So one of the things was because of this whole revenge against Germany. Life was bad for German citizens and German POWs. I mean, it did not look like a bright future. So there was, I mean, even before the war ended, there were so many food shortages for the German people. Like I mean, they're getting surrounded on every side of them, and they're just getting starved off. It's like a Stalingrad all over again, or a Leningrad. It's a siege. So after, it's like how are we gonna get these people food? They're still people. They've been defeated. We at least need to kind of start rebuilding now. So Zhukov sent a directive to get provisions for the people of Berlin. So what happened was he sent thousands or bought whatever thousands, hundreds of thousands and tons of like 1,000 tons of food. And he helped with public service. So we're getting milk, grain, potatoes, cattle, and foodstuffs like sugar and animal fat back into Berlin. They're helping them pretty good. So I mean, there's still lots of animosity between the Russian soldiers and the citizens of Berlin, but at least now it's becoming less animalistic. So they're starting to rebuild back life, but it's a war. It's not the greatest. So up above we have two German men sitting in piles of rubble of Berlin, and over here the occupation zones, as I talked about. Russia was allowed to take Germany, so they kind of got the best end of the deal. And so the other big thing that will come into play in West Berlin is the Americans later on, but the three of them, the French and the British, had to kind of divvy up um, their sectors together. It wasn't really like, hey, have this big piece of land. It was more like, I'm giving you all this piece of land, but you guys have to fraction it off to each other. While I'm gonna take all this over here because it's all mine. I'm the big victor over here. I mean, and that wasn't necessarily Zhukov. That was more like the Russian thinking, the Stalinist thinking of it. So Berlin, 1945. So we got a very detailed picture of Berlin now and Berlin in 45. Like that's the main arch that you go in on the road. Like, just look at this, like bombed out buildings, bombed out cars, rubble everywhere. And over here, a very famous picture for the fall of Berlin. You've the Reichstag burning behind this German soldier, and you can just see the 1,000-yard stare. He's been through the ringer. He's done. So it was bad. So right here's the Reichstag, the German seat of power. Bombed, burned out. Saw heavy fighting during the Battle of Berlin. And right here, we have good old Zhukov with Monty and other British American generals, but you see lots of Russians, and they're looking pretty happy walking through the streets of Berlin. They're the victors of this war. They're the victors over Germany, and they're gonna relish in it. So right here, we have Zhukov, we have Eisenhower, we have the French commander. I believe that is definitely talk about him. We got Monty. So look at this. They're looking like big, strong men. Like they've just won this war against Germany. So, what conferences and treaties was he a part of? So, Stavka, that was a big Russian conference before the end of the war. I mean, they had lots of those, but it was like this is one of the important ones to Russia because all the rest are going to be mainly about the end of the war and with other countries. So, yeah. So he was the official Soviet signatory for German surrender, as mentioned above. So after Hitler committed suicide and the general went out being like, "Hey, we're done," he took that signing. So the Potsdam Conference. So what are we gonna do with Germany after the war? That's what Potsdam was. So like, how are we gonna help the Germans? How are we gonna like harm them for starting another war and killing so many people? Um, And basically, he was there. I mean, he wasn't the main guy making all the plans. Stalin was there, and Truman was there. So he was there. But it's basically choosing what are we going to do with Germany. So, so this is Luttrell. Finally remembered his name. But you got Eisenhower, Monty. So what was his relation with the other occupation zone leaders? So these were the guys taking the four pieces of Berlin. So what was his relationship like with these guys? From what's been stated, he had a pretty good relationship with them. He wanted to be nice. He wanted to share insights with them and be friendly and just like be around for these guys. Like call them up and like have a talk. So he had a good relationship with them. He was always trying to bring down tensions between each of these nations. He's kind of like the peacemaker. In 1955 was the Austrian State Treaty, which was kind of like part of Austria, like uh, tearing itself away from the Soviet Union Iron Curtain, becoming its own thing. So, what are some of his other military decorations and medals? So he's gotten many Bolshevik medals from fighting against the Tsar. World War II anniversary attack and defense medals. So like here of the Soviet Union, he got 4 of those, and other things like that. So it's like for lots of like fighting and sending in troop, he got a lot of medals. And after like the every anniversary of the end of World War II, the Great Patriotic War, so like 5, 10, 25, 75 years, he got medals for those. And one of his other standouts were the defenses of the many Russian cities, like Leningrad, Stalingrad, Moscow, and he got defense medals for those. Mongolia gave him a medal for his duty at Khalid Gol, so they gave him a medal for that. Um, So medals from saving previously Nazi-occupied countries. So Poland, Czechoslovakia. He was a hero to them. So they gave him a little prize. They gave him a medal. So he also received many medals from other countries too, like big countries. So like the Croix de Guerre from France, the Order of Bath from the United Kingdom, and the Legion of Merit from America. So right here are the medals. So we got the American, I believe that's the Croix de Guerre, and the Order of Bath. So what was his relationship with Stalin, and how did he coincide with Russian Stalin genocides? So right here, got big man Stalin and comrade Zhukov. So with Stalin, they understood each other very well. Like he was truthful to Stalin. Like he did not give him any crap. He was like, you want the truth? You got the truth. You can handle it. So he was no nonsense. He gave him anything that he wanted. So he's like, if it's not going well, it's not going well. It's going great. Here's the truth. It's going great. So Stalin, as I said, was a very paranoid man. Um, no matter who it was, like close friend, close neighbor, like colleague, like he was paranoid that this person was going to turn over and kill him, or like start a revolution, become the new leader of Russia, and depose him. So with the purges, as stated before, like in the 39 Khalkhin Gol, he survived by just being a lowly member in the military, like not big enough yet until like after the genocide's getting ready for World War II with Khalkhin Gol. So he was able to survive off the radar. Um, so after the war, because he was an occupation zone of Russia, he was removed from power for his popularity. Stalin was like, this man is getting too big for his britches here, like even for mine. Like people love him. He's doing a great job. This is the kind of man that could depose me. But he didn't want to kill him. I mean, he could have. He definitely could have. But he chose not to. And a lot of that goes into he's just a good general and like his no nonsense with him. So like being able to talk. So it's interesting. I mean, it's hard to describe without like actual firsthand knowledge being like, why didn't this guy die? But it's like it's one of those good questions to ask yourselves. Like, how could someone like this survive? Um well yeah, so he was removed from the Berlin occupied zone, was taken back to Russia, and at this time he was also moving stuff from like his German apartment where he was staying in the occupation zone back to Russia, and all that stuff was seized on the railroads. I mean, just to like bring him down a peg and be like, "Hey, you're stealing. Stop stealing," even though everyone else was doing it. But was kind of singling him out to just be like, "Watch your step, man. Like, I don't want to do more, but I will do more if I have to." So, as I said, they understood each other like very well with military standpoint and the battle and like holding Berlin. They understood each other in many ways. And like they got together a lot for planning meetings or extracurricular like drinking, like brotherhood. But they understood each other. One of the biggest things from Zhukov though is Zhukov was a military career man from World War One and on from thereafter through World War Two. So most of his life was spent in the military. Stalin, on the other hand, didn't have so much of a military career. He wasn't an actual general. During World War One, he started off with the Bolsheviks. He didn't start fighting for the Tsar. He started off with the Bolsheviks, and yeah, he took some bases, took some cities. He fought, but he wasn't an actual general or an officer. Like he didn't fight with tanks. So it was like he didn't really know what was going on. I mean, he took power and he led his country well, in a sense. Well, he has, I mean, genocides, but he didn't have the military know-how like Zhukov and the other Russian generals did. And he definitely did like think, wow, that was really stupid to kill all off most of your officers, the people that are going to lead us through an event, a war with Germany. So he was kind of like, yeah, he's smart, but he's like not really that smart if he's killing his best men. So, as stated above, Zhukov was a popular guy with the troops, with the people. Like he was an out there guy. So everyone knew who he was. They understood him. They liked him. Like he was there for the people. Like he was the kind of guy that was like, don't do anything I wouldn't do. So it's like if I thought that was too dangerous, I wouldn't do that. They liked this guy. While Stalin was like, hey, like just go out there. Like if you die, you die. But like you're doing it for Russia. But he was afraid because of this like energy he had, this power he had with the people. He was afraid that he was going to use that to take over Russia and become the next dictator, leader, or like president. So, as I said above, Zhukov's thoughts on Stalin, how he ruled. He liked the guy, he understood the guy, didn't agree with all his beliefs though. So, what did his relationship with other leaders and militaries around the world look like? Um, most of the people from the West and around the world always thought that Stalin was nice, very nice and understanding man. He wasn't mean, he wasn't brash, but he was understandable. Uh, I mean, even I've said it, the research has said that he's an intelligent man, and it's showing when the other military leaders are like, yeah, he's pretty intelligent too. Well, and that would be like people like Eisenhower and the other occupation zone leaders like Latreille from France and Monty from Britain. Um, so in the 50s and 60s, when he still had some form of power, or at least could keep in contact with other leaders, um, he wanted to work with the West, work things out, like with Berlin and the Cold War. He wanted things to cool down. Like we've already gone through 6 years of war. Why do we need to go through more tenuous times? Also, Western generals and Russian generals alike said that he was very cool headed. He knew how to keep his head like there, not fall off when things went to crap. Wanted to help cool down the Cold War in the West. So, wow, it was kind of the same point, accident by me, but um, he didn't want any war, whether this was like sending troops to and weapons supplies to like Korea's for the Korean War, or like supplying Ho Chi Minh and the North Vietnam and the Viet Cong. So and like things with the Cuban Missile Crisis, like he thought it was all a faux pas. It's like hey, there's better ways than to raise tensions, therm have thermonuclear warfare and nuclear holocaust. So it's like we have much better ways to figure this out. Like let's just talk with people. Let's not show our big sticks. Let's put those away. Let's talk. So right here, we have Zhukov with Nikita Khrushchev in the 50s, kind of like after Stalin's death. So, why doesn't the West know Zhukov that well? So, as I said, after Berlin, Stalin had him removed from power, like barely held any until his death, when he was kind of moved back in. We'll get to that. But he's like, as I said, scared of his popularity, so he kept him on the back burners. Beria and Khrushchev used and removed him from power. So Beria, very close to Stalin before the war, after the war until his death. He absolutely loathed Zhukov. So he kept him further than arm's length away from him at all times. He did not like this guy. And so during the after the death of Stalin vying for power, Beria will be executed by Zhukov and like the military for crimes and air quotations here, like against Russia. So not they did not like each other. So Khrushchev, when Khrushchev was rising to power after the death of Stalin into Russia, um, his right hand man, the defense minister, the general of the armies, was good old Zhukov. He's like, "Yep, you're gonna be right here with me through it all. So let's take back Russia. Let's lead it like Stalin wanted us to lead it." And so for this, he held power. So this was 53. He held power to about 1957. And then Khrushchev was kind of like, okay, you're kind of taking like the spotlight. You're kind of popular still. I want to be the big cheese. Let's put you aside again. Let's kind of force you to retire. Okay, like get out of my way. Get out of my hair. We don't want you here. So one of the big things about Stalin was he was a reformist. So like he wanted the military to leave the government. He thought that like generals and stuff were a lot more competent than what politicians would be. So, and it was kind of reminiscent of like not czarist Russia, but like, kind of like that, and, like with Stalin. So he's like, military should have the power, not the politicians, and that was a very dangerous thought, idea, process. So that was one of the other reasons why it's like, we're going to depose you, get out of the way, let the politicians do their job, not the military. So in 1964, Zhukov was returned to favor, but not to power, to bolster Leonid Brezhnev's political career. So this guy right here, so 64, he's running for big offices, and he's like, why not use one of the greatest not people pleasers, but a person of the people. Let's use Zhukov. And he took power, and he's like, okay, Zhukov, go back to retirement. We don't need you because I'm for the people, not you. So the Cold War age, kind of going over this. So from 1953 to 1957, he was the defense minister and general of the armies. So he had control of everything. He had lots of power, but kind of once Khrushchev was cemented into his position, he's like, okay, I'm gonna take over. I'm gonna have my people do that. Thank you for your service. Please go away. So, this day before, he wanted to cool down the Cold War. Like, let's not make it hot. Let's not have a war. We've already done that. So, this is him in the 60s in the Red Square viewing a military parade. So, later life and retirement and death. What did this look like for Zhukov? So, he was an avid fisherman. So, like, especially for his retirement, but like throughout his whole life, avid fisherman. So, one of the greatest, I think, fishing stories that there is out there about Zhukov, which it's not many. I don't know, maybe there's more in Russia, but in the United States, there's not a lot on fishing. But Khrushchev knew that he liked to fish, and once Zhukov was kind of out of power and retirement, because he still kind of Zhukov had contact with other people, but because Khrushchev was like the leader of the nation, Eisenhower was doing well for himself back in the States. He was like talking to him about Zhukov, and Eisenhower was like, "Oh yeah, Zhukov's a friend from the occupation days." And he was like, um, "Yeah, he really likes fishing. He's retired right now. And he's doing lots of fishing." And so basically, what happened was, Eisenhower's like, "You know what? If I'm gonna send him some fishing stuff, will you please get this to him?" And so he did. So he sent like bait and tackle and lures and lines, and Zhukov used that stuff really well, really sparingly, because he was like, "Wow, the American like fishing gear so much better than what Russia has. Which I think is really funny because it's like the power dynamics and like the culture of the two countries. So it's like, man, let me use the American stuff over my own home remedies. So up until his death, so like 50 through like 57 through the 70s when he passed, he wrote many memoirs, wrote many stories. I mean, it was in many volumes and it all got condensed down to one volume. But he wrote about what he thought of like Stalin and the genocides, and his memoirs were heavily censored for this reason. So he couldn't really say what he wanted to say. So when the Soviet Union fell in 1990, 1991, his full memoir, uncensored, was finally released, and it was released in other countries and other languages. But I mean, the main bulk of his memoirs were all in Russian. So yeah. So he stayed connected to the veterans and leaders from around the world, mainly Russia, but he kept in contact with people and he gave talks about like the Cold War, like, hey, cool down. So he made sure to keep in touch. Uh, so 1967 till he died in 1974, he suffered from many strokes, which would ultimately end up killing him. So this is Zhukov taken by one of his kids, their nieces or nephews, out on a fishing trip in the 60s. So, impact, significance, and legacy of Georgy Zhukov. So this is a statue of him in the Red Square. So, modern warfare. He's still prominent. If you're looking into Russia's modern warfare, Ukraine, especially if you tag the name Zhukov into it, you'll see about the Zhukov plan or the Zhukov maneuver. And this is basically to send troops like straight in the fire to like try to overwhelm and take the position. So it's kind of like just like sending a death wall pretty much, like a suicide squad pretty much, like into their deaths. He has a medal named after him for like valor. Many memorial statues, as mentioned. He has a tomb in the Kremlin where his ashes are. He's cremated, so he's a tomb in the Kremlin next to like other Russian generals. It's a plaque. That's his tomb. It's cool to have that. I mean, it's not very opulent. It's nothing compared to like Lenin's or Stalin's, but it's still very celebrated. And then this is the Russian and Mongolian ambassadors, Mongolian leader, at Kalakangol, where there's a memorial for the battle against Japan, and this is a bust of Zhukov because he was essentially the hero of the victory. And this is the medal named after him, the Zhukov medal. Oh, other facts of this interesting man. So he liked to fish, received bait from Eisenhower. He made the cover of Time magazine 2 times. One was for his defenses of Leningrad, Stalingrad, and Moscow. And then the other was in the 50s, just for like his power and like story of him like after World War II. And the funny thing is, he loved Coke, American Coke. It was his guilty pleasure. And so he was like, he really wanted to get a ton of Coke from America, but it was viewed as like an American imperialist drink. And I mean, as I said, Russia and America don't really have the best relations of the times. So he got a white Coke. He had this created especially for him because of Eisenhower, who knew a guy that worked in a factory, like a friend that could make this stuff. So he got a glass, like clear bottle, and like a red star on it, and he was like, "Hey, it looks like vodka. That's a Russian drink." So it's like, "Hey, There you go. White Coke was invented. Oh, you'd be surprised how one man who's not very well known is in lots of pop culture. So many TV shows, most of them emanating from YouTube, so more like videos, not too much on TV. Um, so this is Memoirs, which was heavily featured in my project, and I'll go into that in my works cited page. But he was in this project quite a lot. These are his memoirs. He's been in many, many, many movies. I mean, whether mentioned or like not him actual self, but like an actor. But the most recent Zhukov in pop culture would be from The Death of Stalin, and it was played by Jason Isaacs. And I definitely recommend this movie. It's comedy. It's superb. And then video games. So this video game right here is World Conqueror. So it's a computer game. It involves like World War II generals and generals from history, but he's one of the featured people that you can use to win. Some quotes that I found interesting of the man. Um, Painting that was made of him right here. Um, It is a fact that under equal conditions, large-scale battles and whole wars are won by troops which have a strong will for victory, clear goals before them, high morale standards, and devotion to the banner under which they go into battle. So it's kind of like um, him talking about like a lot of these quotes will be centered around World War II-esque era fights, battles. So it's just like as long as his main thing here, if they're motivated, they will get the job done. The longer the battle lasts, the more force we'll have to use. So I think this is very eminent for the fights that occurred in on the Eastern Front during the Second World War. So yeah, so whether this is like Stalin or like revenge or just like systematic killings of Russian people, like so especially with battles like Stalingrad, they lasted forever. They were really long, so it's like the angrier you make them, like more we're gonna come back to get you. And as you can see, like pushing through Eastern Central Europe and Berlin, they used a lot of immense force. If we come to a minefield, our infantry attacks exactly if it were not there. So this was in relation to him talking to Eisenhower, 45, and like the Stalinist or the Russian Zhukov practices of just send a wall of men in and they'll get the job done. So it's like, and especially with Russia because of how many men they had, it was like they could be sent in, and no matter how many died, more would take their place. So it's like, hey, no matter the cause, we're going in, we're getting the job done. So right here is from the World War II channel, a video about Georgy Zhukov. Um, so World War II channel. British Path video of Eisenhower down here in Montgomery meeting Berlin. And I also found that there's a whole host of videos on YouTube that you can find, look up if you just search up Georgy Zhukov or Marshal Zhukov. There's a lot of stuff. It's quite interesting. Most of them do a pretty good job. Another one I found was like about his relationship with Stalin. I didn't get like I chose not to get a lot of information from the videos, but it is still nice, like light stuff to learn, listen to if you want extra information. On to my works cited page. So just him on a parade on a horse, which is actually one of the statues we saw earlier during one of the parades. So I got lots of sources, as you'll see, but this is one of them. History, Britannica. There was one quote with like in Berlin during 45 that I had from Killing Patton from Bill O'Reilly. And then New York Times like completed coverage of World War II and John Keegan. So these are my sources that are not the best, but it's like I still got information, so I'm going to put them in. Next, we have my second works cited page. This is Zhukov firing a Maxim machine gun. I thought that was an interesting image to add, just add some depth to his character, already immense character. So on this page, we have my databases that I've used from MCC's college databases. So we got JSTOR, we got ProQuest eBook Central. I really do enjoy using JSTOR and eBook Central. Really good sources for what I've found for my writings, for my research. Works cited page 3, flag of Russia right there. So Zhukov, the rise and fall of a great captain. I used a bulk of my information from this. Just wanted to put that out there. It's a great read. It's old, as you can see, but good read. Marshal of Victory. I did get some information from this. It was interesting. The Memoirs of Marshal Zhukov. This is from himself. So the Spar book and the one by himself, I would say, are chock full of my research. It's a very good first-hand account of like what was going on in his mind, what was going on with the war. So definitely recommend checking that out. So yeah, that is about it. Thank you for listening through this. This is definitely a lot longer than I meant it to be, but thank you for sitting through this. I had a great time doing this project. So have a good day.